Hi, so are you okay being videotaped?
Yes.
Awesome. Sweet. So we're just going to start with some questions about People's Park. Could you tell me a little bit about the culture of People's Park and the importance of maintaining that culture?
Oh, yeah. That's a good question. And the culture of People's Park is something that you're not really going to find written down, but I learned at least a bit about over time by participating in events there. So I was a musician and often asked to play there. And when I started to play there, I started to garden there too, because I thought, whoa, I wanted to do that. So one of the things I learned was that you can bring things to the park, but it's really frowned upon to take things away from the park. Leaves, sticks, like if there were a pine cone or something like that. The understanding was, and this is nothing but an understanding, you leave it there for the next person to enjoy. And I thought it reminded me so much of only leave tracks if you're a hiker in the Sierra Club, and they just say, you know, only take pictures, only leave footprints. And I liked that. And so I began kind of listening in to people who had been there a while, and there was more to it. You would never make money off anything associated with People's Park. So there was always, every anniversary, this probably still goes on, there's a tug of war between people who will create a design for that anniversary. It's the 38th anniversary, it's the this, it's that. And then they would want to sell the t-shirts, and they would claim, some of them would be correct, that all the money would be going back into People's Park, into the park council, and the efforts to just maintain like a website. Some of that would be true. Other of it was not true. So like vendor versus vendor, you know, there would be things like that. But the understanding was you don't try to make money off People's Park. And I thought that was interesting, you know, because there's even been a little book, Terry Compost did mostly a picture book about People's Park. And she did that. She did not make any money off the park. Everything goes into reprinting the book itself or efforts to make sure the park still has a very inadequate website.
Okay. Like many. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the music. That was actually one of my questions. Could you tell me a little bit about the role of music in the culture and community of the park throughout history and now?
Music and
even?
food. Yeah. So the one of the ways, and I don't care where you are, in the park or anywhere, one of the ways to gather people together is have music and have food. The boring speeches can be filtered into that, of course, but it's really the music and the food that bring people together, at which point you can discover whether or not you have anything in common with them, and you do. So that has been, I mean, for years and years and years, people who don't really get a whole lot out of music would argue. I remember these arguments. Oh, you know, we shouldn't be so focused on, Terry Compost was one of them, we shouldn't be so focused on having a big concert because we need to talk more. And the thing is, we tried a few of those anniversaries, and they really did not attract a lot of people because people love, I mean, if people don't love to dance, they love to watch people who love to dance. Yeah.
And play.
And also really feel a rhythm inside them, whether they understand the words or not. There's something much bigger that goes on with people who've shared like a sweaty, hot round of crazy dancing. And we used to have like always a spiral dance, there'd always be the naked contingent there dancing over there. And just people would have their own ways. Often the anniversaries, as a matter of fact, for all of the anniversaries I've ever been to, there have been tribal singers and drummers that begin the dancing with the understanding that this was once tribal land. And it's a nice way to lay the groundwork for other opportunities to appreciate that there's cultural collision and you can't avoid it. So that is another thing that music does. That is music. The drums are music. The chanting is music. And the shared chanting is music. It's really enlivening. For a lot of people here, students and workers included, they've never seen tribal dancing, they've never seen tribal drumming, and they've never heard tribal singing. So I think that's a powerful, very powerful beginning.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. So I've also been interested in you were talking in when you came to class, you were talking about the construction plans that are going on. So I just wanted to ask, what has the community been doing to try to stop or slow down these construction plans?
By community, which community?
Your community predominantly.
You mean park
the
supporters?
Parks community, park supporters, yes.
Park supporters. I'm trying to be really specific because, of course, our mayor, Jesse Ottagine, when he was running for mayor in 2016, said, of course, it would be inappropriate to build on People's Park. It's crucial that people remember that because boy did he flip, and now he says he has no objection.
Right, and haven't they recently decided they're going to, for sure?
Well, they've been deciding they were going to destroy People's Park for over 40 years. Before People's Park was even called People's Park, they were trying to destroy it because it's a culture they can't control. So I consider it just part of a good example of the larger cultural genocide that I think it's important for, especially white people like me, to just acknowledge is so threaded into the fabric of our lives that it's almost something you take for granted and don't notice and don't care about. So when I say community, park supporters are not a big group. They're not a popular group. They don't have political clout. All they are is right. They're right about park history. I mean, the people who are knowledgeable about park history will point these things out, that the University of California has never been benign about People's Park. It has never apologized for even the people who have died to defend People's Park. It's never apologized to me for suing me for $250,000.
I cannot believe that.
I know.
When you told us in class, I
don't think they won't try it again. You know, if you can take an unknown folk singer and argue that she's a threat to public safety, what can't you do?
And it stuck with me when you said in class that they're using that money, instead of using the money for education.
For you.
Yeah, for us, they're using the money to sue a protester.
And that's what
not
made
even protesting.
This SLAP suit, strategic lawsuit against public participation, so unusual, because usually it's Monsanto who sues some little neighborhood group for objecting to toxics or something like that. This was a publicly funded entity, and that made it very unusual, and they got a little self-conscious behind our publicizing that fact, and I think that helped us at the state level when we passed anti-SLAP protections for people like us. That's as far as we've gotten. There are, I think, very few states, I think it's more than California, but I can't remember the other states who have at least a start at anti-SLAP protection. But yeah, they spent way more money than that on this lawsuit against not just me, but 4 other people and then 40 Jane and John Does. But the idea was to frighten people from speaking up for the park, and they've sure done that. People are terrified. Politicians are terrified to do it. You know, even Chris Worthington, all of his political life, and he represented District 7, which includes People's Park, he always spoke up for the park. He was a very brave politician up to about the last 5 years.
And what happens?
I'd like to know. And I was going to wait till this election was over. Regal is now, Regal Robinson, I think his name is now the new representative for District 7. And I'm not sure what Chris Worthington's plans are, but I consider him a friend, and I hope, at least off the record, he'll talk to me about the park. I look forward to that. It'll probably help me understand why he would suddenly lose his voice.
Yeah. So even though there are construction plans, the park supporters are still alive and well. And just because there are plans doesn't mean that's a for sure plan. Okay, good. That makes you feel better.
They always
perfect.
Yeah.
So this is in the same vein. How is the university?
Could I add one thing to that question?
Yes, definitely.
You asked what we were doing, and I have to say, one of the most important things for us to do that we are doing is human being by human being, little group by little group, and op-ed piece by op-ed piece, if we can get something in, is educate people that only 3 blocks away there's 10 acres of Smith Fernwild already dedicated to being UC housing, no views to obstruct, and in bad need of reconstruction anyway. I mean, they're going to have to build something up there or sell the land.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense since they already own the land and it's only going to go up in value. It's the hills, after all, that they would get rid of those 10 acres. And then right across the street, 130 acres of Clark Kerr.
So it's all a money game.
Well,
right?
it's a
Or-
facade to to test the community's willingness to speak up for People's Park. As soon as that's gone, yeah, they'll build anything there just so it's no longer People's Park,
Yeah.
and then they'll go in like it's just like. I don't know if you've been to downtown Berkeley, but about every 5 to 7 years, they redo the BART Plaza. This time they've spent $7.2 million on redoing the BART Plaza.
And it takes years.
Count on it. 7 years from now, they'll want to do something else. Because it's one of the funny things that I do in the Pepper Spray Times is just document each and every iteration of the new, improved BART Plaza. And People's Park is the same way. They come in and they yank out a tree and see how many people protest. You know, they'll lay some concrete and put in a sports court, see how many people protest. And each and every time they've had to either address their own idiocy, and apparently they're going to take out their own basketball court, which was the one thing they left because we actually thought basketball was cool.
Yeah.
Not the concrete, but it started off being sort of a pounded sand court of some kind. It was some kind of half-assed compromise, but it just makes me laugh that this is all a game to test community will and the strength of that landmark, which is only a city landmark. There's no strength to that, really. They knock down city landmarks all the time. But before its 50th anniversary, which is coming up next year, they don't want it to get national recognition, and it well could. So
Let's hope.
Yeah, that's
should.
what we're just trying to do.
Cool. So this is very related, and you've answered it in a lot of ways, but how has the university specifically silenced members of the park and the community and park supporters in the past? So specifically, could you speak to like the 60s, 70s first, and then...
By shooting them.
Perfect.
Ask the family of James Rector, who I think bled for 3 days and then died of a splay of gunshot to his middle. Alan Blanchard was blinded. You know, the political career of Ronald Reagan was made behind deciding that UC students were a bunch of spoiled brats and really needed to be pounded on and called in the National Guard, and never looked back. No apology there. So that didn't just punish UC students, it was an entire community of workers, businesses. The disruption to Southside every time they do this costs millions of dollars, and apparently they don't care. You know, they are marching toward this as if that had never happened in the 60s, and then it happened again in the 70s, and it happened again in the 90s, and in the 80s, what Lonnie Hancock, who had always said, well, you'd never build housing on People's Park, obviously she's silent on this issue too, what she began to do was decide that homeless people should not be allowed to rest or sleep there. And they had been sleeping there at night. It was a place where there was food services would come. People who wanted to donate food or share food would go there, and people would spend the night there. And so she just drove up with or not her personally, but under her administration, they drove up with a trash compactor and just threw people's belongings in a trash compactor. Everything. So there was a successful lawsuit. Not everyone was in that lawsuit, because a lot of people, they just flee in terror. But the people who stayed and fought have names, went on the record, talked about losing Bibles, losing family jewelry, losing what little they had as people with very little to their names, and won their lawsuit. So the principle is pretty simple. I can't just run off with your backpack. It's yours.
Yeah.
You may be here after hours, but that doesn't give me the right to just run off with your backpack and decide that, hey, you broke a law, so ta-da.
It's all mine now.
Yeah. Well, Lonnie Hancock, who is now, a state representative, did that and has never apologized. So I mention those things because our politicians are playing the same game that the University of California did. Who's going to object? How are they going to object? Will it hurt me? Will it hurt me legally, politically? They're all playing that game. And it makes me really sad because the park really is just kind of a scruffy little piece of ground. And people, I'm often thinking that anybody who came here as a student and said, People's Park, I want to go see it, would stand there and go, what? Is that all there is? Because without its history, without the stories that they try to stop us from telling, without any effort to be accurate on the city website, on the University of California website, and there's no effort to be accurate. They've never asked me to speak. I was so shocked when Dr. Bareilly asked me to speak.
I was so glad she
I hope
did.
you have tenure, girl.
Right. Yeah.
No, but it's not really much I can say. They do know how to silence people.
Yeah,
if I had been a student, you better believe there would have been other repercussions. And the people here on campus who talk about Palestinian rights, for instance, have really interesting stories to tell you about the new iteration of silencing and repression.
I'd be interested in talking to them too.
Yeah. They have a good story, and there's a small group of lawyers who try to assist them, but it's kind of like our small group of lawyers, underfunded, and always finding that the courts have found a new way around what used to be the obvious argument. You know, no, you can't just stop someone's education because of what they said or what they wrote. So, yeah.
Okay, well, one final question is sort of in a different vein, a little more positive maybe. What are some key elements to the essence of the culture of Berkeley in your eyes? In general, maybe some adjectives you like, or I don't know, any way you'd want to describe.
Well, you know, up until the last few years, my answer would have been very different. I was walking up here now, kind of lamenting the flip that Jesse Adeguin did. This was a really big flip. He spent 2 years running saying that he would work with the homeless advocacy groups that I've worked with all over town. And then as soon as he got into office, and this is, you can look this up in public documents, as soon as he was technically the mayor, he took our report, which asked him to do, oh man, we had like 15 bullet point things that he had agreed to do. He just gave himself an A and retired the document. He did that himself without consulting with any of us. And I think I'm the only person in town who wrote about it in one op-ed piece and also in the Pepper Spray Times, just giving himself an A and saying, over with that, done with it. So I really feel like hypocrisy is the thing that I'm looking at now in the city of Berkeley, where what we do is embrace ourselves for using words like diversity, for caring that at least one black person be in the room when we convene to discuss an issue. Only one, thank you.
Yeah.
But watching us dwindle from about 12% black population to, I think it's half that, maybe 6% now, and not really taking the obvious steps we need to take. And by obvious steps, I mean housing and addressing our own racism. Because I have to say, there's been enough attacks on synagogues here in Berkeley. We had the Nazis come here and get an embrace from the Republican club on campus. We invited Richard Spencer.
And others.
Yeah, under the guise of free speech, which is kind of silly when you think about it, because I don't really think that racists feel they can't talk, but that's the claim. I think that if there was anything I wish we could meditate a week about, it is our obvious hypocrisy as a town when we're watching our diversity just dwindle away. And I think that on campus, the struggle is very real for students of color here, and that I'm not sure how safe they feel talking about it. I hope they do, but I can really, when I remember being a student here, I just remember it was neck and neck keeping up with the reading and the writing. constantly new assignments, and I used to like dig right into them and try so hard. It took everything I had to get good grades, and I did, but it was not a walk. I didn't have time for a lot of extracurricular nothing. And so I really feel for the students here. If anybody's expecting them to change this world, I just go like, whoa.
Like, wow.
I hope you know the workload these young people are under, because it was not too much for me, but it would have been too much for me to know a whole lot about my city government. Forget it. Even who represented me. I think I voted, but probably imperfectly. You know, I have to say, it's very real for me. I think about the expectations of the students here and what they're paying just to be here in comparison to me, who got here just after it stopped being free. $30, I think. $30. Yeah.
You can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard for it's probably hard for students, I'll say us, just because it is for me too, to get involved with other things in the community that we want to and that we feel passionate about, because we're up to here with work and like you said, and you know, dealing with financial needs and food needs and so hopefully that can get better in the future. I don't know.
Demand it of Gavin Newsom. He's not just rich. He knows a lot of rich people.
That's right.
He's in a position now to appoint to the UC Regents and get rid of a lot of dead wood. I gotta say, University of California education used to be free, should be free. We need to return to those days. And what it's gonna take is an energized electorate. I think we have it now.
We do too.
Yeah. It should be that you can be a student here and explore other things besides your schoolwork. It should be. I mean, I don't feel like it was for me, but I think I was terrified of not doing all of the recommended reading as well.
Yeah, and a lot of us are.
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah, there's a reason why it's there. There really is.
Yeah.
And it can make or break a paper to have a footnote in there and say, contrary to blah, blah. It made me a better writer. It really
definitely.
did. So I really understand that. I really want the students here to have a sense of being grateful for the education they get. And that's kind of the culture I came from, where it's a wondrous, wondrous thing just to learn to read. It's an even more wondrous thing to be guided by people who really have a powerful understanding about a whole field.
Oh yeah.
And my father used to really try to impress upon me, take advantage of that moment. You know, you may never have it again, and that it's something really special. I want this place to return to what it once was, which was this really amazing resource for the interested population of young people and older people who really wanted exactly that. They wanted to explore, wanted to read things they'd never read before, and find out more about who they could be before they had to commit to something, you know, so, yeah.
Awesome. Well, yay, what a great finish. Thank you so